Welcome to eBird for Beginners. I'm Brett Thielen, the Science Director with the Harris Center for Conservation Education. For those of you who are new to us, we are a nonprofit organization based in the Monadnock region of Southwest New Hampshire. We help people fall in love with the natural world where we are through education of all ages, land protection, and conservation research. One of the things that I do at the Harris Center is to coordinate our citizen science projects in which community volunteers collect various kinds of ecological data with the goal of protecting wildlife and wild places and informing smart land management. So many of the Harris Center citizen science projects are fairly local or regional in scale, but today we're going to be learning about the largest citizen science project in the world, eBird. And what's really exciting about eBird is that you can contribute to it from anywhere, including your own backyard. So our guide today will be Stephen Lamond. He is a PhD candidate at Antioch University, New England. He's also a skilled birder and a skilled eBirder, both as someone who contributes his own bird sightings and as a scientist who analyzes the sightings that have been contributed by others. So if you haven't done so already and you want to follow along, it'd be a good idea to download the eBird app to your smartphone. The first portion of this workshop will be looking at the app. And you might also want to sign up for your free eBird account at ebird.org. The second portion of the workshop will be looking at the website and all the amazing things that you can do there and learn there. So we're joining at just a few minutes in progress. We had a few technical difficulties recording the Zoom initially, so we'll be joining Stephen in the middle of his introduction, but it should be easy to just jump right in. Thanks again for joining us, and here we go.
Survey you may have heard of. It's been going on since the mid-1960s, and it focuses on North American breeding birds. What's great about eBird is it's not just during a certain time of year. You can submit a checklist at midnight, at 3 a.m., 2:30 in the afternoon, any time of day, any time of year. It's open to your sightings whenever you want to submit them. So that's a little bit about the history of bird observations and why they're so great, and why eBird is wonderful. It's run by a team of 5 people out of the Cornell, so small staff. They oversee the future directions and where the data set's going. But what really powers eBird is the observers and then reviewers. So these are people who review sightings. If there's a particularly rare bird, like a sandhill crane in Connecticut this time of year, or the Mississippi kites that are breeding in eastern New Hampshire, something rare, it's going to trip a filter in eBird and say, you know, this is a notable sighting and here's why. And it'll ask you to provide some extra documentation for it. We'll get more into this in a little bit. So if you have the eBird app, I'd like you to open that up. I'll do it on my phone as well. I'll just talk you through a couple of the features. And so everybody on their phone should see something similar to this. It has the date, time, the option to record a track, and start checklist. What the record track feature does is it keeps track of your duration and distance. So these are 2 really key features of submitting your bird observations. Not only is it helpful to know where you are, but also when you're birding. So if you're looking for owls, we could go into the eBird dataset and see that they're more commonly detected at night when they're calling. So time of day is important. Also date is important. If you're looking for a snow goose, an all-white goose, a little smaller than a Canada goose, it's good to find them during migration times, so in the spring or the fall. So time of year is important with your sightings. Below that is record track. So this is all part of the effort. This allows scientists to calculate how detectable certain species are. So if you're out birding and you're looking for a chickadee, chances are you might only need to stand outside for 5 minutes before you can hear one. Or if you're looking for a barred owl or maybe an American bittern, it could take several hours for you to find these more elusive species. And so this effort feature of eBird is really important. And then at the bottom, we have the ability to start a checklist. So I'm going to create an indoor checklist just to show you a couple of the features. So if you're following along, click that Start Checklist button. And once it acquires the GPS signal, so there's a GPS built into your phone that allows you to use Google Maps and other location-based applications. But I should note, if you're not following along right now, everything that we're doing on the app can also be done online. If you go to ebird.org/submit, I'll post that in the chat. Yeah, give me 1 second. So all of this can be done online as well. You'll have to sign into your account to do so, but I'll post the link for you now. Let's see, I see a question about confirming rare bird sightings. We'll get to that in a second, actually a couple minutes. Okay, so if you're using the app, the next thing that comes up, sorry, my screen's a little bright, is the list of species here. And you'll see that there's some color codes next to several of the species. If you see a red circle, that means it's unreported or underreported for your area. And so I live on top of a mountain, and so it's really rare for these sea ducks, like a surf scoter or American black duck, to be seen where I am. So those are underreported on my list. Wild turkey I see from time to time. So I have a yellowish orange circle that's half filled in. Those are infrequently seen. So right away you can see which birds you're likely to come across and which birds you're less likely to come across. Up at the top, you can see that there's a clock counting. It's keeping track of how long you've been birding, important information, as well as the track. And so it calculates how far you've traveled. And so this is a neat feature. If you're doing surveys for waterfowl, you can estimate how many mallards you see per mile versus how many wood ducks you see per mile. So say you're out birding, and we'll all get to practice this in about 20 minutes, and you wanted to enter in, say, a chickadee or something near your house. Click on that species in the app, and you'll see a window pull up. You can enter in the number of, in this case, I entered bald eagles. Say I saw 1 bald eagle, I could enter that and then hit OK, and that's it. When entering birds into eBird, there are 3 things you can do. You can enter a 1 to say that 1 is present. You can also enter a number greater than 1. So numbers are always better than estimates. You can get an exact count, excellent. However, 1,000 starlings just fly by, you don't have time to count all of those. So give it your best guess. If you really don't want to give an estimate, for whatever reason, you can put an X in that place, and this indicates that the species is present. For some of you, if you're not seeing the half circle, it could be in the eBird settings, and so I can get to that during the break if you want to hang around and how to pull that up. So enter in a number for a certain species, and then you can hit done, and that'll get applied to the species. Okay, if some of you are seeing the species names in Latin, that's also in your settings where you have the scientific name turned on. You can change that to the English name. Great question. And so for mine, I've already set it up so that it defaults to the English name. It's easy to add more individuals to a species that you've already entered. You can click the number next to the species just once. And sorry, this isn't working out so well. You can click the number next to the species and you'll see that count go up. And once you've entered all the birds you're able to identify, you can go ahead and submit your checklist. So if you're done watching your feeder for the morning, you finished breakfast and it's time to get back to work, or you finished hiking, or finished a kayak ride and noting all the birds, you can press stop to submit your checklist. So what this does is it ends the track and it ends the time. So now our effort data is entered, it's automatically generated, and we can submit our checklist. So on this submission page, you see a date and time at the top when you started. You see the option to choose a location. I'll get to that in a second. And then beneath that is an observation type. For many of us, we're sitting here participating in this workshop, so we are stationary. We have our number of observers. This is another part of the effort data. How many people were looking? The more people that are looking, the more birds you're likely to find. And so this helps scientists calculate how detectable certain species are and make the wonderful maps that I'm about to share with you. So you can change the number of observers. It's better to share a checklist with a group. So if you're going out with 2 or 3 people, and I imagine most of you aren't going out in large groups during COVID-19. If you are, staying 6 feet apart. But if you are birding in a group, it's important to share the checklist so that your observations are not duplicated and scientists don't have to vet that data. Now, here's another key part of the submission, and again, you can do this online, is are you submitting a complete checklist of the birds you are able to identify? So what is a complete checklist? Well, it's everything that you as a birder, could be a beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert birder, wherever you are in that spectrum, everything that you were able to identify. So some people are bored by rock pigeons or house sparrows, starlings, chickadees, really common species. However, it's important to document those on a complete checklist. So if you're submitting all the species you're able to find, even if you couldn't identify half of them, that is okay. eBird is open for everyone. If you're able to identify and you're submitting a list of everything you can identify, check yes. And then you can submit the checklist. I'm not going to submit this one since I didn't actually see 4 mallards and a bald eagle just now. This is just for the demo. In the comments section, you could add whatever you want. It doesn't even have to be bird related. I like to add information about the weather. So if I'm looking back at old checklists, I can say, oh, it was really cloudy and rainy that day. No wonder I didn't find a bunch of things. Or I had a great outing with my friend so-and-so, and then we went to lunch and got ice cream. You know, you can add memories to these checklists so that when you go back and look at them, you can also sort of revisit that day. So those are some of the things I like to add to comments. If I found a particularly rare bird, I could add in the comments where at that location it was found. Okay, I see a couple questions coming in. Sure, so once you cancel the checklist, if you want to do it with this one, you can click close in the top right-hand corner. And then at the bottom of the app, you'll see this checklist icon. It's the second one from the left. And you'll see a list of your unsubmitted and submitted checklists. To delete this test app that we worked through, you can slide the checklist that's not submitted to the left, and you'll see a little delete icon show up. There's also ways to delete eBird checklist from the website itself. So this app is really great for submitting your data, but if you wanted to add photos or audio recordings and really explore the database, all of that is done online, which we'll explore after the break. And then I see another question coming in. For setting the location, yes. Through the app, it's not recommended to set a location to a certain town or a location, because the more specific the location is, the better the data is for scientists. So if we wanted to add a location first, in that review window, for those of you who are still there, and you click on choose a location, there's 3 options. There's either recent locations, so if you've gone birding before using the app, you can pick one of those locations. eBird also searches for nearby locations. So this could be a personal spot that you've been to before, or what's known as a public hotspot. So these are publicly accessible locations that people like to go birding at. It could be Antioch University. It could be the airport, any airport really. And I'll show you these in eBird website. But it searches near you to find locations. You could also go to the map option, and this will show your specific location. And so if you don't want to give away your house for privacy concerns, you could click on the map and place the marker on the road nearby outside your house, and say you can name the spot such and such road. And on the map, it also shows a recording of your track for where you walked. So once you've selected your location, you can say use this location. It'll update your checklist to see if there's any changes for rarity or high counts, things like that. And that's the overview for the checklist. So I'm also going to share with you a video that eBird has produced for how to submit a checklist. Let me grab that. So this is worth watching, even if you have the app or don't have the app installed. This walks you through what to click on, how to add species, change the location. So you can click on this link or paste it into your web browser and check it out. It's only 2 or 3 minutes long, but I recommend watching it. And you can also access this anytime, whereas I might only be available for this hour or two. So at this point, let's see, any questions about the app or submitting data? Because once this data is submitted, this is where it really gets exciting, and we can start to build a personal profile, and we can explore how our data is getting used for science. So if anybody has a question, they can raise their hand or post it in the chat. Sure, okay, so canceling a checklist. So if you're at the eBird homepage in the app, and you click on checklists at the bottom, it pulls up, there's 2 options at the top, not submitted and submitted. Let's see. And then under the not submitted page, it should show that test checklist. And if you swipe it to the left, a little delete icon shows up. So once we test the app, let's see. Okay, Amy, I'll help you in a second. Once everybody goes to practice a real checklist outside about why the checklist isn't loading, but thanks for letting me know.
Did you see Brian's question about if you're kind of like looking out your window a number of times over the course of a period of time, how you deal with that?
Yes, thank you, Brett. So yes, if you are at home and looking out the window several times over 3 to 4 hours, what I'd recommend doing is keeping one checklist for that time and then marking it as incidental. So under the checklist types, there's traveling if you're walking or kayaking, and then there's stationary if you're sitting and actively birding. There's also incidental. So if birding is not your primary purpose, you might be working and you're glancing out the window every now and then, or you're gardening and you're kind of keeping track of what you're hearing and seeing, use the incidental or incomplete checklist. Both of those will work. I typically use incidental checklists for if I'm just noting a bird while driving or walking with a friend, not really birding, and then I'll mark the location and specific time. If you're monitoring birds or keeping track of them periodically over several hours, you can use a stationary checklist and mark it as incomplete. So you're not recording all of the birds that you're able to identify in the area. So if birding is your primary purpose, mark it as complete. If not, mark it as incomplete. Great question, Brian. Who here has ever wondered how to count birds? Flying every which way, it can be difficult, or you see a huge flock of birds all at once. So this is tricky, and it takes a little bit of practice, but it's good to start at a bird feeder. So oftentimes, you can differentiate between male and female birds. So you might see a male purple finch and a female purple finch come to your feeder. And so those you can easily tell are 2 separate individuals because they look very different. Same thing with red-winged blackbirds. The males are nice and black with the red wing patch, whereas the females are brown and streaky. And so you can right away tell if there's males and females present that there's multiple birds there. What about chickadees? Males and females are identical, unless you're holding them in the hand and looking for a brood patch for a nesting female. And so in this case, you could see count the birds you see at any one point in time. So 7 a.m., there's one chickadee at the feeder. 7:02 a.m., there's 2 chickadees at the feeder. A couple minutes later, there's 3 chickadees at the feeder, and then it goes back to 1 chickadee. I would enter 3 chickadees on that checklist. There could be more, but I can only see 3 at any one point in time. So it's the maximum number of birds you can see at once. Exceptions would be if you can tell between males and females. So you might see 3 male red-winged blackbirds, but then later 1 female. So we know there's at least 4 individual birds there. If it's migration, so common nighthawks got back to the area a couple weeks ago, or Canada geese migrating overhead, they're typically moving in one direction. And so you might see 50 Canada geese early in the morning flying north, and then 35 Canada geese later in the morning also flying north. Chances are they're not the same flock, because you know they're migrating and they're headed in the same direction. So thinking about the direction birds are moving, and if it's likely for them to be sticking in the area or continuing to move on. If you're looking at a large flock of birds, starlings, rock pigeons, Canada geese, any sort of waterfowl, what I'll do is I'll estimate by tens. So it'll take too long to count them one by one. So you can find a section of birds, count them individually, and then once you have an eyeball for how many birds are in that area, multiply by how many times that area takes up the full group of birds. And so for especially large flocks, you might estimate by hundreds or thousands. Here in New England, especially out in the woods where I am, we're not dealing with thousands of birds, usually small flocks. But if I go to the coast, it can be easy to get overwhelmed by the number of birds that are out on the water. So coming up with ways to estimate group sizes is a good practice to have. And always entering an estimate for how many individuals are there is always better than having an X in your checklist just to say they were present, because that X could mean there was 1 bald eagle or 1,000,000 bald eagles. We really want to know which is it. So give it your best guess, even if it's wrong, that's okay. Any questions about counting birds? Because once you're able to count birds and you can ID a handful, you're ready to use eBird. So I'll be here to stick around and answer any questions, but what I'd like you to do now is take 15 minutes and go and practice using the app. So I want you to test using one checklist. You don't have to go far. It could be a window, or if you're able to go outside, you can do that. Listen for everything you're able to hear, and then add it to the app and go ahead and submit it. And then once that's done, we'll come back around 4:45, and I'll walk you through what your data is doing for the world and for conservation. And we'll get to see some really exciting maps and charts and graphs that are automatically created from your data. So if you have any questions, stick around, you can ask me. Otherwise, go out and test using the app. Okay, I'll maybe take 2 or 3 volunteers to share out what they found on their checklist just now. You can raise your hand or post in the chat.
I will, Steve. This is Laurie Sable. Well, I'm an absolute total rank beginner birder. I can usually identify robins and cardinals. We do have several feeders in our yard, and I just went outside and found a lovely goldfinch. Also very obvious to identify, but honestly I don't know if I'm seeing a male or a female. And I also saw, I think it was the hairy woodpecker in another one of the feeders.
Excellent. So hairy woodpeckers, many of you may know, look very similar to downy woodpeckers.
Mm-hmm.
They can be told apart by size, the relationship of the bill length to the head length, and you can also look at the outer tail feathers. So I won't get into too much about ID today, but if you're ever confused, on eBird there's a category for downy/hairy woodpecker.
Okay.
So if you can't tell which one it is, you can mark it in that category.
Okay. I also wasn't too close to that feeder, so I must say I'm not 100% sure that I saw the which kind of woodpecker it was.
And that is okay. I get stuck all the time. There might be a hawk, and I just got a glimpse of it flying through the trees, or even downy and hairy woodpeckers. The angle might not be right, and I just and so it's nothing to be ashamed about. If you can't identify a bird, even a common one, there's always a category for you to put those ones you're unsure about in
Mm-hmm.
eBird. Does everybody, maybe one more person, do they want to share what they found? Jamie, go ahead.
So mostly the only one that I really saw was an American robin, but I heard, I did see the yellow-bellied sapsucker. I heard a red-eyed vireo, tufted titmouse, white-breasted nuthatch, hermit thrush, chipping sparrow, and a black-throated green warbler.
Wonderful. That's a good diversity, Jamie.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And Maddie, thank you for posting. Kathy as well. Pileated woodpecker, that's exciting. Brown thrasher, Patty, that's a good one. I wish I had those at my house. So yes, if you did a checklist earlier today, that's fine. As long as you have something in the app, that's going to work. And so if you go back to the eBird homepage in the app where it has the submit button, you'll notice there's a couple more icons down at the bottom. If you click on checklist, you'll see your not submitted checklists and your submitted checklists as well in the second menu. So you need to go back and edit one of these checklists. You can access them here. If you want to add photos or any sort of media, a short video or an audio recording to a checklist, that is only done through the eBird website and not through the app. This Explorer feature that Mark and a couple others and I were talking about earlier is new. So you can explore nearby locations and see which birds have been seen there. And then over on the rightmost icon down at the bottom, it says My eBird. If you click on that, it brings up the list of species that you've seen in your county this year, as well as this month. So if your goal is to find 25 species in the month of June, this is one way you can keep track of that. You'll also see some green numbers throughout the app in this My eBird page. Any of those can be clicked on to view a list of the species that you found. And you could also, there's 3 dots in the top right-hand corner. If you click on that, you can search for a larger area. So New Hampshire, United States, and even the entire world. So you could look at your lists of species in different places. James, that's great. You found 3 house sparrows, a tree swallow, and a feral pigeon in Nashua. Always good to document those birds, regardless of where you are. People ask me, why are you noting down that starling? And it's important. In Cheshire County, which is in southwestern New Hampshire, we're actually starting to think that rock pigeon populations are declining, and we're not sure why. So worth study, and every bird should be submitted. Okay, so at this point, I am going to share my screen, and we are going to explore the eBird website, which is really where, if you don't see the Explore icon on the app, it's possible you have to update it to the newest version. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Just give me a thumbs up or a wave. Great. So this is the eBird homepage. There's a fair amount you can do without signing in. However, I recommend everybody gets the free account so that they're able to sign in. And the free account is necessary for the app. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And this pulls up sort of my homepage. It lists some statistics over on the left-hand side, the number of species I've photographed, number of species I've recorded, complete checklists. And this webinar is getting recorded, so you can come back to visit this at any point in time. There's also some YouTube videos that are out there. eBird offers this eBird Essentials course online that you can take for free through your eBird account. So this is your eBird homepage. You can look at more lists of species by country, state, county. So this is a great way for all of your data that you're submitting to be accessed in one place. If you wanted to summarize observations, so say you just went on a trip to Nova Scotia or Peru, and not many of you are traveling now, or say you just did a day trip and went to multiple locations, you could create a report of all the birds you found during that time. So say during this pandemic, I'm reflecting back to February when I was able to travel places, and I could create a week-long report for all the found during the first week of February. And then from here, you can select all the locations you went birding and continue. And then what this does is it produces a chart, a table of everything I saw. So I saw mallards 5 different times, common goldeneye a couple times. I can look at high counts, abundance, frequency, species totals. So this is a way to summarize everything you've submitted to eBird by weeks, months, or years. And you can also download this. If you're handy with Excel, you can download a CSV and then graph the data however you like. You can also get a printable version to print for your records or to share with others. So now I'm going to tab back to my eBird. So we're back on our home page here. Another thing I recommend everybody does is they set up what's called your profile. And so if you wanted to share your sightings with others, you can do that here. Yes, you can add birds you saw a week ago. When I first got into eBird, which was about 3 years after I started birding, I decided this is amazing. I'm going to go back and find all my bird photos ever, as well as any note I made about a bird at any point in time. So I went all the way back to when I was 7 years old and found a note of a tufted titmouse singing in my front yard. And I entered that in eBird. So whenever you see birds, if you have lists and old notebooks, hunt those down and you can enter those in eBird. It's really, really valuable information whenever it was from. And so the app is really handy for submitting birds in real time. If you're going birding, use the app. But if you're looking at historic records, even just yesterday or a year or 10 years ago, you can submit it through the website. Great questions. And so that's possible through this submit button in the top left. Starts out with where, so similar to the app, where are you? You can choose from a list of locations. You can find it on a map. And then after this, it'll ask you, what did you see? And enter your species, as well as your effort. Were you traveling, stationary, etc. I'm not going to dive into this so much here, but if you're curious about it, we have time at the end, I can get back to it. So back on the My eBird homepage, if you click on your profile, I think this is really cool. I've always been into maps, and the profile maps your bird sightings for you by county, by state, and by country. So I haven't traveled too far out of North America, but within the US, you can see that I've seen birds in quite a few states. If I wanted to zoom on a particular state, you can see where in New Hampshire I've done most of my birding. So I think this is great. I don't really have any personal privacy concerns because it only shows this at the county level. You can upload a photo, you can link to a website, and you can write a little bit about yourself so others in the eBird community can get to know you and say hi. Down below, if you've submitted any photos, your recent photos can also appear here, as well as recent audio recordings and latest checklists. And these are all optional. You can turn these on and off so other eBirders are able to view it. But I think this map feature is so cool. So you can do it by species, by checklists. You can see I've done a lot of birding in Cheshire County. You can do it with photos or audio as well. So this is the eBird profile. And you don't have to make it public at all if you don't want to, but you access that map for your sightings. Here in this Manage My Checklist option, which is the second one down in the right-hand menu, this is where you can add media. And so if I wanted to edit a particular checklist, I click on View and Edit. It pulls up the list that I may have submitted through the app. It has a track of where I went. And then to add to add media, it's this green button on the right-hand side. So if you have photos on a camera and once you move those onto your computer, you can click on Add Media and it'll bring up a new page where you can add details to more species and upload media. So earlier we were talking, let's see. So you can also add more observation information here. So I didn't actually take any photos for that checklist, so I won't upload any right now. But that option exists. So going back to the My eBird homepage, we've gone over the profile, summarize observations, managing checklists. So say you've gone birding with a group of people, and somebody else was keeping track of the eBird checklist and they shared it with you. To view these checklists, it's under My Shared Checklists. So I have very few recently shared checklists in here because I haven't gotten together with many birders in the past month or so. But here you can see a list of checklists that other people own but were shared with me. And what's great about sharing checklists is that you can edit a checklist that's been shared with you. So say you're going birding with a big group and everybody at the front of the group was seeing all the cool stuff. But you in the back maybe missed a couple species like an orange-crowned warbler or a cans. And so you could remove those species to your list. However, maybe you got lucky and saw a green heron that some of the other people missed. You could add that to your checklist and you can upload your own media as well. So with the shared checklist, it's helpful so that data is not duplicated, but you're able to edit it to reflect everything that you see. So for managing checklists, again, that's on the eBird homepage once you're signed in, My eBird. Manage My Checklist is on the right-hand side. And once you open that up, you're able to view all of your checklists. If you want to add media or share it with somebody else or delete it, all of these options show up on the right-hand side. So to add media, click View or Edit. It'll pull up that checklist, and then you can click Add Media on the right-hand side. So that's how you're able to do that. Okay, Manage My Locations. So this one I don't use a whole lot, but you're able to edit specific locations. So maybe you submit a bald eagle at your house by accident when actually you saw it on the highway driving home. And so you could edit this location and move it somewhere else. You could also rename a location. So automatically it will call it something with coordinates. So these ones I still have to go into and give it a good name that other birders would find helpful. So I might call this Pete's Seafood Restaurant or something like that. Something useful, or Frank's House, or Harris Center Headquarters, or Harris Center Property, such and such. So these are all personal locations. Most of these are. You can see that they're marked with a P in type. However, some of these, well, we'll get into hotspots later. So let me get back out of this. So if you need to edit a location, that's where you can do it there. Now, some of you, I imagine, have been noting birds down for a long time, well before eBird existed. If that's the case, you can import your data using a pre-formatted CSV or comma-separated file. Question about the locations from Carrie. When you edit a location, will it come up in the mobile app? Yes. You may need to close the app and reopen it, but it will refresh that location. great question. So importing a file, if you have a long life list, you have to format it into one of these two formats, and these are available online. If you have specific questions about this, you can let me know after. There's either the checklist format or the record format, but you can add an unlimited amount of observations and then upload them into eBird, and they get added automatically. So just make sure you have your location, so where you were, date and time if possible, when you were, and then of course what you saw. So what, where, and when are the three most important things. Other options exist. I'm not going to go into them today. Manage imported data and then download my data. So if you wanted to share with friends or make a custom map or just have a backup of your data that's not online, you could download your data and it downloads your entire eBird observations list. Another cool thing about eBird, and there's a lot more cool things I have to share with you today, you can go to manage my alerts. So if you're looking for, say, a broad-winged hawk, you haven't seen one yet and you want to find good places nearby, or if somebody reports one, my alerts will send you an email when that bird or that species has shown up. And so you can sign up for several different alerts. Here are some ones I've signed up for already. ABA rarities, this is the American Birding Association area, which is the lower 48 states, Canada, Alaska, I think is in here, but not Hawaii. And so if a rare bird shows up, you'll get an email, and maybe it'll be near you and you can go check it out. If you wanted to find rare birds in your county, you could enter in your county here. So if you're in Middlesex, Massachusetts, you could search for rare birds in this area. So we can view the list too. Common tern was seen recently, several of those. Yellow-bellied flycatcher is a fairly southern record for a yellow-bellied flycatcher during the breeding season. And you can see whether or not the sighting's been confirmed or if it's still unconfirmed. But not everybody's into looking for rare birds. Maybe just working on a list. So if your goal is to find 100 species in your county over the course of the year, you could get an email whenever a bird that you haven't seen yet this year shows up in your area. So you could do it for Rockingham County, New Hampshire, say. And then you could view the list to see what you still need to see this year. So if you're into alerts and you want to get dozens of emails in a week about needs, you can sign up for these. Okay, once again, back to my eBird. You might be wondering, how do you find a quick list of everything you've seen? And so anything that's in blue and has an underline, this will hyperlink to another page. And so if I wanted to look at all the birds I've ever seen, I would click on this link, and then it would look through the database, filter for everything that I've seen, and it would pull it up here. And so it's a list of not only all the species you've seen, but where and when you saw that first bird. So recently I saw a pink-footed goose that was here in Concord, New Hampshire. I think I went looking for this bird 15 times over the past 4 years, and they always seemed to be gone when I got there. But this one was here, which was great. Some new birds when I was down in the Bahamas doing research are here as well. And then you could scroll all the way back if you really wanted to go down memory lane and say, oh, there's that first tufted titmouse, February 20th, 2003. It's just a great way to sort of relive some of your exciting or first sightings. So this is the My eBird homepage. Does anybody have any questions about what we covered in the past 15 minutes or so? So this is all about your data. So how do I find a sighting of the species in a particular area? Yes, I'll get to that in a second. And from Brett, yard birding. Yeah, this is really great. And sharing data with others. Okay, so I'll tackle the sharing data with others. and then go into yard birding. So say you've submitted a checklist online or in the app, and you want to share a checklist. I'll show you how to do it in the website first, and then I'll talk about it in the app again. So go to Manage My Checklists, find the checklist you want to share, and then click on the Share button. So I've clicked on one. It pulls up the checklist, and then over on the left-hand side, this window appears where I can share the checklist with other participants' eBird accounts. I'm prompted to enter a username or an email, and if I'm sharing this with multiple people, to separate them with commas. So typically when I'm out birding with multiple people, I'll ask for them to give me their eBird username, and I could type those in here. Once I've entered somebody's eBird username in the past, they're now listed in my contacts so that I could quickly click on a person and add them to the checklist. You could also enter the email as well if you don't have a username. Just make sure it's the email associated with their eBird account. Some people will have multiple emails account, but only one of them is linked to their eBird account. So just make sure it's that one. And you could also add a message to the checklist, say, hey, this is the checklist from when we went birding 3 weeks ago, finally sharing it with you now. Or had a great time with you birding, really enjoyed seeing the razorbill, something like that. You don't have to add a message, it's optional. If you are in the app, when you're on the review page for a checklist, you can change the number of observers to how many people were there birding with you. And then once you've done that, you can share the checklist with others. It'll prompt you to, you'll see a little sharing icon, and then you can type in the usernames there. And that should be in the video that I posted in the chat as well. Question about life birds and how they're displayed with date and location on the same line. Now it's 3 lines down. I don't know why that is. And sometimes it can take eBird a little bit of time to get back to you. If it's been 2 weeks, I would reach out again. But yeah, they are a small staff, so it's hard to get to everybody's questions when there's hundreds of thousands of people around the world using eBird. So keep plugging away. It's probably just an update and they're responding to other people's comments about what they wanted to see changed. But if you let them know that you didn't like the change, that's good feedback, and they might change it back. All right. So, question about yard lists. And so during this COVID-19 pandemic, although a lot of states are starting to open up, many of you have probably been exploring the bird life right in your yard. And so it's easy to keep track of birds in your yard. So far we've explored just My eBird, which is one tab at the top, and Submit, so how we can submit data online. If we go to the Explore tab, you could spend hours here learning about species, their distributions, their home ranges, and so much more. So if you want to create a yard list for what you've seen, and perhaps you're curious on what time of year you can expect certain birds to show up, so you scroll down to compare your totals and click on Yard Totals. I'll open this in a new tab. What you can do is add locations to create a yard. And so my yard, which I've called Andorra, consists of a couple locations all right near each other on my property. And you can see I've submitted 506 checklists here all time and found 107 species here. And I also have a couple other yards for where I've lived in the past so that I can compare them between places I've lived. And if I click on bar charts for this yard list, I can see what time of year certain things are expected in my yard. So this is a really neat visualization of the data that you're submitting. And so Canada geese I first found towards the end of March. They've been here all spring. I haven't submitted any checklists for the summer before, but I also see them in the fall. And so you can create one of these charts for your yard based on what you're submitting. So this is what a yard looks like. If you wanted to add a new yard, it's as simple as clicking add a yard, and then it'll load, just give it a name, and then you can add your locations to it. So chances are you already have an eBird location for your house. Just search for that location by the location name and add it to the yard. Once it's added, you'll click Save Yard, and that's all it is. And then your bar charts will be automatically created. All right, George, I see your question about how to find good sites for spruce grouse. We're going to get to that in a second, actually a couple minutes. Still working through the personal data, but then we're going to get to other people's data, hotspots, and then what this does for bird science. So great question. We'll get there shortly. So back to this Explore tab. Let's pick a species. So George, you just mentioned spruce grouse. So I can type that in here. If I click on this, it brings me to the eBird's spruce grouse profile page. I can see photos. I can see compare male, female over on the right-hand side. Over here on the left, it colors in the icon if I've seen it and photographed it. I've never recorded, got an audio recording of a spruce grouse, and I have not seen one this year, so those icons are blank. It has some basic identification information as well. You can quickly listen to the spruce grouse by clicking on this button here on the right-hand side. Down below, there's some quick statistics. How many times have I seen spruce grouse? How many times have I photographed it? And then overall, how many times have people in eBird seen spruce grouse? 18,000 times. And they've almost been photographed almost 3,000 times. On the right, I can see a range map of where they've been seen. And if I click on large map in the top right-hand corner, it'll pull up this map in a big window. So the darker the purple, the greater the frequency that they're being seen. So the darkest purple is on 40 to 100% of eBird checklists. People are reporting spruce grouse. And so spruce grouse, like the boreal forests of northern US and Canada, so this taiga zone, whereas they're not really found in the southern US. And so quickly I can see their general distribution for the species. If I keep zooming in, say we're in New Hampshire and looking for spruce grouse, I can type New Hampshire in to the top right-hand corner. Go spruce grouse in New Hampshire. So it zooms on that location, redraws the grid to a finer resolution. And I can see that spruce grouse are really only reported in the northern half of the state, and only in certain places more so than others. If I wanted to look at specific places these are seen, I can click on Show Points Sooner on the right-hand side, and it'll show me specific locations where people have reported spruce grouse. Any icons in red are birds that have been seen in the past 30 days. So it's a fairly recent sighting of spruce grouse. I could click on any of these icons and it tells me who saw it. So this observer, Nick Tepper, found it. He also submitted a photo with the checklist. But a number of other people have also reported spruce grouse at this location, all the way back to 1985. So somebody's gone back and entered a historic checklist. Closer to southern New Hampshire, here in Conway, there's a recent sighting of a spruce grouse, May 23rd, so about 3 weeks ago in Tin Mountain. And this looks like the furthest south sighting back in 1968. So the climate was a little cooler in New Hampshire that many decades ago, so it's possible spruce grouse, they were breeding at this location, but over the years they started to move northward. So this is where you can get a map for a particular species, when and where they've been seen. So if we wanted to look at another species, say the black-capped chickadee, oops, that's location. It's good to type it into the species search bar. I can load a map of chickadee sightings, and I'm guessing many of you are thinking it'll cover the entire map. Slowly loading. Look at that dark purple covering most of this part of New England. So chickadees are one of our most common birds. They make it onto a lot of eBird checklists because they're so common. And so they're found pretty much ubiquitously across northeastern United States. However, if you're in South Carolina, chances are you're seeing a Carolina chickadee instead of a black-capped chickadee. So if we zoom out, we can see that the range of the black-capped chickadee tends to stop in Virginia, Pennsylvania. They get more rare unless you're high up in the Appalachian Mountains. So see this lighter purple patch in northern Maine? Chances are black-capped chickadees are still very common there. There's just fewer eBirders there documenting them. So that would be one of the places I might schedule a trip to go and try to find more chickadees to help out the eBird database. So again, to get here, this was in Explore. And then I searched for a particular species and then clicked on the map. You can also get directly to those maps by clicking on Species Maps, and you can search for a species that way. So say you're just getting into birding, just getting into eBird, and you want to see which birds live close to you. Does anybody want to volunteer a county that they live in, and we can explore the birds found near them? You can either type it in the chat or unmute yourself.
How about Arlington County, Virginia?
Sure, Arlington, Virginia. And here we are. So 245 species have been found in Arlington, Virginia, and almost 15,000 eBird checklists have been submitted for this county. Right now it's getting filtered for species that have been last seen. So mourning dove, chimney swift, blue jay, these were all seen yesterday. And so it takes a little bit to update. At the top, you can see it says updated about 14 hours ago. So eBird, again, is this huge database that covers the world. So this can lag a little bit. However, recent visits, you can see there are some checklists from June 16th today. And so you could click on these to see what's been found. You can also see which birds were first seen. And so, wow, a common gallinule. This was a new record for the county as of April 27th, 2020. Until then, one had never been reported in Arlington County before. You could also look at high counts. So what's the maximum number of species people have found before? 2 green herons seems like a low high count. However, green heron is very elusive. It's tough to see multiple at one point in time. 12 house wrens, if you know that chattering, really small brown bird that's louder than you would think for its small size, that's a good number. Wild turkeys aren't typically common, it looks like, in Arlington County, Virginia. I typically find a dozen or so at my house. Let's see, so you can look at these maximum, wow, 300 double-crested cormorants. This is a species that will flock together, so you can find large numbers of them. If we keep scrolling down on the right-hand side, you can see top eBirders. So you get a ranking based on how many species you've found or the number of checklists you've submitted for a county. And so you can look to see who the top eBirders are in the region and look to see what they're finding. And also top hotspots. So these are, again, those publicly accessible areas where you can go and to find lots of birds. Fort C.F. Smith Park. People have found 167 species there. Potomac Overlook Regional Park, 157 species there. And you can click on these and explore them as well. We'll stay at the county level for now. The next thing over is bar charts. So similar to what you can do with your yard list, but with thousands of checklists. for a particular county. So these bar charts can be really accurate for what species are present and what time of year they're there. So it looks like Canada goose, this is the 4th or 5th one down. We see solid green bars all the way throughout the year. So they're present year round. Whereas if we scroll down and look at gadwall, which is a type of duck, we see that they're really here in the winter only, December through February, more or less. Keep scrolling down. Observe this by the size, the height of the green bar. Very common all year round. Chimney swift, common, but not year round, only during the breeding season. And so all of these charts and graphs are from data that you've submitted, which is so exciting. So you can help improve these graphs by submitting more eBird checklists and going to new places. Say we wanted to compare mourning doves and rock pigeons. We wanted to get a line graph throughout the year. So to do that, I was on the bar chart page and I clicked on the the graph option next to this bar chart. And it looks specifically at the species. So throughout the year, this is the frequency or the percentage of checklists that mourning doves are present on. If I wanted to add another species, I can go to change species. Mourning dove is already checked. And I can add rock pigeon. So these are the two dove or pigeon species that are found in Arlington County. And I can compare them. Okay, so mourning doves are in pink and rock pigeons are in blue. On any given day throughout the year, I'm more likely to find a mourning dove than I am a rock pigeon. However, I'm most likely to find a rock pigeon late July, early August. So maybe they've just hatched or fledged and more of them are flying around. Or rock pigeons from nearby towns are moving in. Interesting. I'd be curious to see if there's any rock pigeons in mid-February, something to keep an eye out for, because according to the eBird data so far, very few rock pigeons are found during that week of February. You can also look at the abundance, so how many birds are found on each checklist, birds per hour, high counts. So this is interesting. Remember, mourning doves are pink and rock pigeons are blue. While you're more likely to find a mourning dove at any point during the year, you're more likely to see more rock pigeons at any one point. And so somebody reported 220 rock pigeons the first quarter of April. You can also look at totals and average counts. So some more ways to interpret this data for a region. So how did I get here? This was through Explore, and then I searched for a region, and through that region I got to the bar chart. You can also get there by going directly to the bar charts and searching for a region. It could be a county, state, or country. Next up, hotspots. So these are the publicly accessible areas where people like to go birding. It could be a small park, it could be a cemetery, it could be a national wildlife refuge, a national park. Larger areas tend to have multiple hotspots. So remember, the important things for eBird are where, when, and what. And the more detailed the where can be, the better. So if we zoom in, these are color-coded by the number of species. Anything in red is over 600 species have been found there. So if you're planning a trip to the southern Himalayas, Eastern Africa, or northwestern South America, in the Amazon rainforest and Andes Mountains, really, really diverse places for birds. However, not many people might be traveling during the pandemic, so we could search for a more local area. Say you wanted to go birding near Nashua, New Hampshire. We could zoom in and see what hotspots exist there. So again, color-coded. Couple hotspots that are in yellow, so that's in the 150 to 200 species range. Looks like there's probably some diverse habitat types there that allow for lots of different species. Whereas the blue, the light blue ones are under 100 species. And so maybe your goal, if you're birding locally, is to change the hotspot color from blue to green. You could bird there until you found 100 or more species. or contributed enough species that it's now over 100. So this is a great tool to use if you're headed to a new area and want to look for those birdie places where you can find lots of different things. If we click on a hotspot, it pulls up a little tab, gives us a rough overview, but then if we click on View Details, it will pull up more information. So very similar to what we were just looking at for the county level in Arlington, Virginia, we're now exploring this specific hotspot called Woodmont Orchard in Hollis, New Hampshire. And so you can see high counts, last seen, first seen, bar charts. You can also get a printable checklist. So if you're used to picking up a bird checklist at a National Wildlife Refuge, you can now print one of those out for any hotspot on eBird. And it's a list of things that people have found here before. What's really great about eBird is for anybody who's uploading media as well, it all shows up in the illustrated checklist. So this exists for hotspots in regions as well. So here's a photo of a cackling goose that was submitted by Susan Risley. Here's some migrating Canada geese, also submitted by Susan. And so this photo is from that hotspot. These birds were seen at that location on October 5th, 2018. And so it's a great it's a virtual field guide to study the birds seen at that specific location. Nobody's photographed a wood duck here, so if you have a camera, you could go out and try to find one. Common merganser, ruffed grouse, rock pigeon. They're there. You can see that they're there between March and November at least, but nobody's photographed a rock pigeon. So you could get your rock pigeon photo featured at this hotspot location. It looks like very few species have been recorded. 141 still need audio recordings. So this is a great way to sort of profile your own work and add to the database for things that are still missing. Alrighty, any questions about hotspots, bar charts, exploring regions, exploring species before I dive into the next thing? If you have a question, you can post it in the chat. You can also raise your hand and say hi. Okay, so we have a question coming in about the species maps. So how do you go from the purple spots to the little red and blue sighting records? So I'll show you how to do that. Does anybody want to volunteer a species for us to look at? Could be a common species, something uncommon, something in a different part of the world. Common nighthawk. Thank you, Brett. So if you're out in the evening between 8 and 9 p.m. this time of year, you can listen for painting and booming, these two noises. They're a medium-sized flying bird. They're not common, so that's a misnomer. They're not truly nocturnal, so that's a little bit of a misnomer. And they're also not a hawk. So this name is fairly confusing for new birders. They're actually a nightjar. And so they're highly camouflaged species. They like to nest on gravel rooftops where their eggs look exactly like a rock. Very difficult to see. But they forage on insects while they fly. This time of year, if you're lucky enough to see one, you go out in the late evening or very early morning, and you might see one cruising by some lamps or lit parking lots. Baseball fields with their lights on is another great place to look for them. So overall, common nighthawks, heavily reported in southern, Quebec or Ontario. Also just east of the Rockies, you can find them a lot. So to view the specific locations where they've been seen, you can either use the zoom in tool in the top left-hand corner to zoom in and find them, or you could search for a specific address, and that will zoom into the scale where you can see the locations. Another tip is also clicking the Show Points Sooner box on the right-hand side. However, if you're still zoomed out, it won't be visible. So this evening, some of us will be going to Keene, New Hampshire to search for nesting nighthawks. And so here's a map of where they've been seen. Blue is older than 30 days. Red is within 30 days. So somebody could click on a location and get a record for where they've been seen and how many were there. Great question. Thank you, Brett. Okay, another question coming in about hotspots and looking at the illustrated checklist. And so we can explore a hotspot from the Explore page. And it's this option down here, Explore Hotspots. Do you have a birding hotspot in mind, or does anybody want to look at a place in particular? Well, I'll zoom into Antioch University, New England. Thank you, Brett. We're on the same page. And so we've worked really hard to work with the students and other faculty here to build a big eBird database for what birds are being seen on campus throughout the year. It's a little tricky in the summer when a lot of students go away for internships and during the holiday break when students are also at home. But during the rest of the year, we have really good coverage for when species are present. And so we can see a bar chart for this as well. So this is for that specific hotspot. Still a couple gaps in the data, so we're not there yet. If we were to look at these bar charts for the county or a state, it'd be much more filled in. But I digress. Getting back to the illustrated checklist, once we are on a hotspot homepage, under this overview tab, you see a couple others, recent visits. So this lists checklists. And then the third one is illustrated checklist. If you click on this, this lists the species in taxonomic order. And right up at the top, you can see that 94 species have photos, but 38 of them still need photos. Same thing with audio. Only 7 species have audio recordings for this location. We still need 125. So this is where you can view what's missing for certain hotspots. And these illustrated checklists also exist at the county, state, and other regional scales. Great question. All right, so this is the Explore tab. I want to show you one more thing here and then dive a little bit more into the science part of things. Here's where you can sign up for that eBird Essentials course. It's very similar to this workshop, but you're not working with a live instructor. There's video recordings, there's a short quiz at the end. I recommend this, it's free. And once you have your eBird account, you can access what's called Bird Academy and sign up for courses that way. Merlin Bird ID, so if you have this app, it's great for identifying birds by entering location, date, habitat, or what the bird's doing and what its habits are, and general colors. So this helps you identify birds that you're seeing. And then you can also quiz yourself. You can take either a photo quiz or a sound quiz, and this uses audio recordings and photos that are by users like you. And you can create a quiz for a certain location at a certain time of year. So if you're planning a trip to Peru or Boston, you can look up what species you're likely to come across. I also want to show you this target species feature. So again, this is great for trip planning. If you're stuck at home but daydreaming about your next bird trip out of the region, somebody want to volunteer a location they'd like to travel to? It could be anywhere in the world, even if you don't have plans to go there. Costa Rica, wonderful. That is high on my list of places to get to in my life. Okay, so I can type in a location. Say I'm headed to Costa Rica in June, which is when my calendar might be free. I could also pick custom months that I might be there. And I'm looking for things in Costa Rica that I've never seen in Costa Rica before. And so it could be from my Costa Rica life list. If I want to look for birds that I've never ever seen before, even if I've seen them outside of Costa Rica, I could look for ones that would be new to my world life list. We'll just look for my Costa Rica life list. Click on Show Target Species, and it creates a list of species in Costa Rica found in June based on their frequency of detection. So clay-colored thrush is the most commonly reported species in Costa Rica in June. It's found on 46.64% of checklists. And if I wanted to, I could look at a map of clay-colored thrush in Costa Rica. And it would pull that up here. So it brings us to the species map, pre-zoomed to Costa Rica, and with clay-colored thrush already selected. And there it is. So wow, dark purple, very frequently, very commonly reported bird in Costa Rica. Scrolling down, things start to get a little less common. Brown jays, palm tanager. And with any of these, if you're curious what a squirrel cuckoo looks like, you could click on it and it would bring you to the species profile page. And there's the adorable squirrel cuckoo that you could explore. So this is a great way to learn about birds. Even if you're not submitting a lot of eBird checklists, you can hop on eBird and explore those species as well. So that's the target species feature of eBird. Great for traveling, planning trips, or learning about the birds in an area. What I'm going to dive into now, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end, is the science of eBird. And so this is a wonderful, eBird's great for users and people who might not get into the nitty-gritty of the data. But here's what scientists are using the data for. Really the status and trends. So is the bird common, uncommon, rare? Has it always been rare, or has it gone through a large population decline? So let's look at a common species, say the white-throated sparrow. You might not see any this time of year depending on where you're living, but during the winter they're a common feeder bird. So there's a bunch of maps on several animations that I'll share with you. This is the abundance animation. So the darker the color, the more abundant the species is. There's lots of white-throated sparrows here. And then on the right, we also see the time of year slider. So this is January 3rd, early in the year. If you want to find a white-throated sparrow, go to Eastern Virginia, Eastern Maryland, Delaware, maybe Central Arkansas. You'll find lots of them. However, they can still be found in Northern New York, Southern Canada, even Newfoundland, and parts of California. Now watch how this changes throughout the course of the year. February, March, April, May, spring migration, June, July on their breeding grounds, August, September, migrating back south, November, December on their wintering grounds. Let's watch that again. February, March, April, May, we see their spring migration, breeding way north in Canada, northern Maine. Then they migrate south in October, November, and then December and January, they're on their wintering grounds. This visualization would not be possible without eBird users like you. All of this map is letting scientists learn so much more about where birds are, what time of year, and how the population is moving as a whole. So if we were to pause it right here in July, we can see that there's a really high density of white-throated sparrows breeding on the eastern shore of Hudson Bay. Northern Maine, White Mountains of New Hampshire, the Adirondack Mountains of New York. Great places to find white-throated sparrows in July. And then we watch the animation a little bit more, and fall migration, they move south to their wintering grounds where they stay. So this is a species migrates within the continent. If we were to look at something like the Baltimore Oriole, this is what's called a neotropical migrant. They migrate throughout northern and central and a little bit of South America. So again, this is starting January 3rd, wintering grounds. Dark purple is high abundance. Let's watch. Spring migration, they're moving, and now they're breeding throughout the eastern and northern United States. Fall migration in August and September, back down to their wintering grounds in Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador. I think these are mesmerizing, and knowing that it's coming from eBird checklists submitted by you and me is just so exciting. We can also look at a really detailed range map. Let's see, here it is. So this is in the status and trends page of eBird. So if you have a field guide handy or look at one in the next couple days, look at the range map. Chances are it's going to be a pretty blob shaped, whereas this is a high resolution map of where these birds are breeding in red, where they're migrating in yellow, and where they're wintering in blue. It also gives me a calendar of what time of year they're wintering, migrating, and breeding. If I wanted to, I could look at just a breeding map. Just look at the breeding season. I'm sorry, non-breeding, that's what I clicked on. And these maps are publicly accessible. You can download them for a presentation or to show friends and family. If I wanted to look at the abundance, so not only where are they breeding, but how many are breeding there. The darker the red, the more abundant they are. So southern Michigan, southern Ontario, eastern Massachusetts, Connecticut, great places to see breeding Baltimore Orioles. In migration, eastern Texas, phenomenal place. Whereas wintering Baltimore Orioles, if I wanted to study those, I would probably go to Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, one of those countries. And so these maps were not possible 12 years ago. And since that, we've been able to come up with these maps. Unfortunately, they only exist for North American birds right now because the number of eBird checklists submitted has to reach a certain threshold before we can make these maps for other parts of the world. But we're getting there. So in the next 5 years or so, I expect to see some of these for Europe and Africa and Asia. Alrighty, so that's what all of your data is contributing to. It's very exciting. Not only can you keep it in one location, so you can visit your old sightings and submit new ones, you can also see how your data is contributing to science and what scientists are using it for, looking at populations over time, ranges, breeding, etc. But because eBird is driven by people who are submitting to eBird, it's also limited by who's submitting to eBird and what they're submitting. So always remember to submit everything you can find. Complete checklists are always better than incomplete or incidental checklists. And so who knows if that spike is really a thing, or if it's just we don't have enough data to even that out. Great question.
I don't have a question, but I do want to just share a comment, which is that before I started kind of listening to you talk about eBird, I really only was using it to record things that seemed unusual to me. Like if I saw a hawk eating a pigeon in a parking lot, that would be cool, and I would submit it to eBird because I had never seen that before, or like looking for common nighthawks, which are not so common. But I really just want to emphasize what you have shared with us, which is that it's by sharing our sightings of common species that all of that other really amazing information is now available to scientists and to birders. So the range maps and the bar charts, and that it's really, there's a lot of, I think it's easy to say, oh, it's just another chickadee. But in this case, it's really even, every one of those, or a rock pigeon that maybe people aren't, recording as much because they don't consider them to be wild birds in the same way, and they don't see them as having as much value. But in this case, it's really clear from what you've shared with us that it's important to share even the most common sightings if you're, wanting to be part of this. So it's a really compelling argument for recording all the things that you see and not just the things you think are special.
Yeah, thank you, Brett, for iterating that. I know the Mass Audubon State of the Birds report predicted that black-capped chickadees, which is the state bird, won't be found in most parts of Massachusetts 100 years from now. So their range is shifting northward. And so it's important to still document chickadees where they are now so that when they disappear, we'll know when they disappear. And same things with reporting rare species and not common ones. What that does to the data is that it can express that these rare species are more common than they actually are. And so it's all relative. We need to be reporting the common species as often as we are reporting the rare species. And scientists have found that blue jays are declining. Their population is declining. Not much and slowly, but they are declining. And this data is from eBird, which is really great. But if people aren't submitting blue jays, well, then we'll know less about their populations. So it's okay if you can only identify robins and Canada geese at that point. Just submit whatever you can, when you can. All the data is useful. And don't forget that if you can't identify a certain species, if you confuse Merlin or it can't help you, or you can't get a photo and reach out to somebody else, there are those catch-all categories for hawk species or duck species. You could still enter those observations into.
Thanks everyone for coming, and a special big thanks to Stephen for sharing his considerable knowledge with us in such an accessible way. We really appreciate it. And till next time.
Yes,
Yeah,
go out to eBird.